The elderly choir sang the first note. Simon Cowell stood up from the judge's desk, rose to his feet, and walked toward the golden buzzer in a move no one expected. America's Got Talent. The Dolby Theater. Another Tuesday night audition. Another packed house. The familiar rhythm of talent television, hopefuls taking the stage, judges offering commentary, the audience cheering or groaning depending on the performance. Simon Cowell sat at the judge's desk in his usual position, arms crossed. That skeptical expression he perfected over 2 decades of judging talent shows. Ready to deliver the truth, no matter how harsh. The next act was announced. The Silver Harmony Choir. 12 people walked onto the stage. Not the young, energetic performers the show usually attracted. These were grandparents. The youngest looked to be in her mid-60s. The oldest, a man with snow-white hair and a cane, had to be pushing 90. They arranged themselves in a semicircle, some holding hands for support, others standing with the careful balance of people whose bodies had carried them through decades of life. Terry Crews, the host, approached them with his characteristic enthusiasm. "Welcome to America's Got Talent! Tell us about yourselves." An elderly woman with silver hair and bright blue eyes stepped forward slightly. Her name tag read, Dorothy, 78. Her voice was soft but steady. "We're from the Willowbrook Senior Living Community in Ohio," she said. "We've been singing together for 3 years. Most of us, well, we're all we have left. Our spouses have passed. Our children are grown and busy. But we have each other. And we have music." Simon's expression didn't change. He'd heard countless sob stories over the years. Sad backstories were part of the audition formula. "And what will you be singing today?" Terry asked. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "A song called One More Day. It's about getting one more day with the people we love. The people we've lost." The other 11 choir members nodded, several of them already crying. Howie Mandel leaned forward at the judge's table. "That's beautiful. We're ready when you are." The stage lights dimmed slightly. A single piano note played, and the Silver Harmony Choir began to sing. The elderly choir sang the first note, and Simon Cowell stood up from the judge's desk, leapt to his feet, and walked toward the golden buzzer. No one knew what was happening. Their voices were not perfect. Not by technical standards. There were wavers. Occasional pitches that didn't quite land. The natural limitations of aging vocal cords. But there was something else. Something that transcended technical perfection. There was lived experience in every note. Decades of love and loss. The sound of people who had buried spouses, raised children, survived wars and recessions and heartbreaks. Voices that had sung lullabies and funeral hymns and happy birthday and goodbye. "If I could have just one more day," they sang together, "I'd hold you close and never let you stray." Simon's arms uncrossed. His jaw tightened. His eyes, those famously critical eyes that had reduced countless performers to tears, began to glisten. The other judges noticed immediately. Heidi Klum glanced at Simon, then back at the stage, clearly moved herself but surprised by Simon's reaction. Sofia Vergara had tears streaming down her face. Howie sat completely still, transfixed. The choir continued. Their voices blended, and perfect but honest, fragile but strong. Several of them were crying now, tears running down weathered cheeks, but they kept singing. For each other. For the people they'd lost. For anyone listening who understood what it meant to want just one more day. Simon Cowell stood up. Not the casual standing he sometimes did. This was abrupt. Urgent. His chair scraped backward with an audible sound that echoed through the theater. The camera operator scrambled to adjust. The control room director started barking into headsets. "Camera 3, stay on Simon." "What's he doing?" Simon walked out from behind the judge's desk. He stepped onto the stage floor, his shoes clicking on the polished surface, and began walking toward the stage. Toward the choir. toward the golden buzzer platform that sat stage right. Terry Crews, standing in the wings, froze. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't how auditions worked. The choir kept singing, most of them with their eyes closed, lost in the music and memories. They didn't see Simon approaching. They didn't see the entire audience lean forward in their seats, confused and captivated. Simon stopped the show. No one knew what was happening. To understand what happened next, you need to understand something about Simon Cowell that most people don't know. Simon wasn't always the harsh, unflappable judge. That persona was cultivated, useful armor in an industry that ate people alive. But beneath it was a man who had experienced profound loss. Multiple losses, actually, but one that had shaped everything that came after. His grandmother, Marie? She'd raised him during the summers when his parents were working. She was the one who taught him about music, not just the technical aspects, but the soul of it. She'd sit at her old piano in her cottage in Brighton and play for hours, teaching young Simon that music wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. Anyone can hit the right notes, Simon, she'd tell him. But can you make someone feel something? That's the real talent. Marie had been a singer herself, back in the 1940s and 50s. Small venues, local performances, nothing famous. But she had that quality Simon would spend his life looking for in performers. The ability to make you forget where you were and transport you somewhere else entirely. When Marie was diagnosed with dementia in her early 80s, Simon watched the woman who taught him everything slowly forget who she was. Forget who he was. Forget the music she'd loved her entire life. In her final months in the care facility, there were brief moments of clarity. And during those moments, the staff noticed something. If they played music from her era, she would sometimes sing along. The words would come back. The melodies would unlock something the disease couldn't quite steal. Simon visited her 3 days before she died. She didn't recognize him. Didn't know his name. But when he asked them to play one of her favorite songs, One More Day, an old ballad from the 1950s, she'd begun to sing. Weakly. Imperfectly. But she sang. It was the last time he heard her voice. Simon Cowell, 28 years old and already hardening into the persona that would define his career, had sat beside his grandmother's bed and cried while she sang a song about wanting one more day with the people you love. He never spoke about it publicly. Never mentioned it in interviews. It was too private. Too painful. He locked it away with all the other vulnerable parts of himself and focused on building an empire. Until tonight. 26 years later. When 12 elderly strangers stood on his stage and sang his grandmother's song. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this performance is still ahead. Simon reached the golden buzzer platform. His hand hovered over the button, that famous golden button that, when pressed, sent acts directly to the live shows, bypassing all other rounds of competition. But he didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, he turned back toward the choir and held up his hand, the universal gesture for stop. The music cut off. The choir opened their eyes, confused and frightened. Had they done something wrong? Was Simon about to deliver one of his famous harsh critiques? The audience was silent. Confused. This wasn't how the show worked. Simon stood there for a moment, his hands still raised, visibly struggling to compose himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, barely controlled. "I need you to stop," he said. "Just for a moment. Please." Dorothy, the silver-haired spokesperson, looked terrified. Did we do something wrong?" "No," Simon said quickly, shaking his head. He walked closer to the stage, until he was standing right at the edge, looking up at the 12 elderly faces staring down at him with confusion and concern. "No, you did everything right. I just need to. I need to tell you something before you finish." He paused, clearly fighting emotions he rarely showed. "That song you're singing. One More Day. My grandmother used to sing it. She was a singer, back in the 40s and 50s. Nothing famous, just, she loved music. She taught me everything I know about why music matters. The choir members were crying now, understanding beginning to dawn on their faces. She got sick, Simon continued, his voice cracking. Dementia. In her final months, she didn't know who I was. Didn't remember her own life. But they played that song for her, and she sang along. It was the last time I heard her voice. The audience was completely silent. You could hear people crying in the darkness. The other judges weren't even trying to hide their tears now. Simon looked at each of the 12 choir members. You're not perfect singers. Your voices shake. You miss notes. But you know what? You're singing the truth. Every one of you has lived long enough to know what that song means. You've lost people. You understand what it means to want one more day. And that. He had to stop, composing himself. That's what real music is. Not perfection. Truth. He turned to the golden buzzer platform. I'm going to do something now. And I want you to finish your song. All of it. Don't stop. No matter what happens. Backstage, producers were begging him to continue, but he didn't. Simon's hand slammed down on the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling. Lights flashed. The audience erupted, screaming, crying, jumping to their feet. The other judges stood, applauding, tears streaming down their faces. But the choir, those 12 elderly voices, kept singing. Through the confetti rain. Through the cheers. Through the chaos of celebration. They sang about having one more day. About holding loved ones close. About memories that never fade even when voices do. Simon stood below the stage, looking up at them, confetti falling around him like snow, and he didn't try to hide his tears. He let them fall. Let the cameras capture it. Let the world see Simon Cowell, the man, not the persona, grieving and celebrating and honoring his grandmother through 12 strangers who understood what she'd known all along. That music isn't about being perfect. It's about being human. The song ended. The final note hung in the air for a moment before being swallowed by applause that shook the theater. All 4 judges were standing. The entire audience was on their feet. Terry Crews was crying. Backstage crew members were wiping their eyes. But what happened next, no one in the theater, or watching at home, could ever forget. Simon walked onto the stage itself, another break in protocol, but no one stopped him. He approached the choir, who stood together in their semicircle, holding each other, overwhelmed by what had just happened. He stopped in front of Dorothy, the silver-haired spokesperson. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper, old and worn. This is a set list, he said quietly, though the microphones caught every word. From one of my grandmother's performances in 1952. I've carried it in my wallet for 26 years. I want you to have it. Dorothy's hands trembled as she took it. She unfolded it carefully and there, written in faded ink, was a list of songs. And at the bottom, One More Day, Marie Cowell. She sang your song 70 years ago, Simon said. And tonight you sang it for her. Thank you. Dorothy embraced him. Then the other choir members joined, and Simon Cowell, the man who'd spent decades building walls around his emotions, stood on the America's Got Talent stage surrounded by 12 crying grandparents, and he let them hold him. The audience was in tears. The judges were in tears. Millions watching at home were in tears. When the embrace finally ended, Simon stepped back. He looked at the 12 faces, weathered, wise, beautiful in their age and vulnerability. Keep singing, he told them. For yourselves. For each other. For everyone who wishes they had one more day. Dorothy clutched the set list to her chest. We will. We promise. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten. The Silver Harmony Choir went on to the live shows. They didn't win America's Got Talent, but that was never the point. They performed One More Day on live television, and afterward, senior centers across America started their own choirs. Thousands of elderly voices found each other through song. Simon kept a photograph from that night in his office. 12 grandparents holding their golden buzzer trophy, with him standing beside them, smiling genuinely, not the smirk, but a real smile. The photograph sits next to another one, his grandmother Marie at her piano in 1952, the same year as the setlist he gave away. One more day turned into thousands of days of music, connection, and remembering that age isn't the end of having something to say. It's just the beginning of knowing how to say it.